The Newcomer, page 186. Maybe it was in the middle of the night. The whirling chop, chop, chop of the solar copter brought Terry and Louise out from the dusty hut. They shouted and waved their arms with joy, thrilled by the arrival of their rescuer. Instead of landing, the copter lowered a huge crate and left. Frantic, the couple chased after the aircraft, screaming for it to come back. As it disappeared over the mountains of rock, so did their hopes of rescue. They wandered back over to the crate and pried it open. Inside they found some food, dry goods, clothing, cooking utensils, and instructions, matches, bolts of material, and a sewing kit, along with instructions and a huge medical kit. Taped to the bottom of the crate was an envelope. Denise yanked it free and opened the letter. Taped to it was a key that she recognized. She read the note to Terry. Greetings, survivors. Of course, this is not what you expected. Rescue is not feasible at this time. Neither is explaining the details as to what happened to Diana after she stranded you there, or the situation here. Know that we will be constant in our help with your survival. I can say that Queen Lucretia has taken over the running of Nicion. She's a wonderful queen, thinking mostly of her daughter's welfare. You'd be proud of her. You know what the key is for. Sending it to you is safer than keeping it here now. Use it. It may grant the hope that you need. Always with you, F. Folding the letter, Lenise looked at Terry. There was no fear in his eyes, no surrender, no pain, just acceptance. How could she possibly feel otherwise? They both looked at the crate and the unpacked provisions. The rising sun brought warmth to their bones after a cold night, but it also brought a blazing heat. The low buzzing of unseen insects intensified with every second, becoming an alarm for them to seek shelter. They threw the provisions back into the crate, and Terry dragged it across the sand to the hut. It was stifling inside, but there was shade. Hunger consumed them, so they broke their fast on the prepared biscuits and preserves that they'd been sent. When their stomachs stopped complaining, they made plans for the day. At sundown, they would search for water. In the meantime, they would set up house. Cleaning was foreign to the both of them, and consisted mostly of scraping off the layers of dust onto the floor, then pushing the debris out the warped door with a broom that they found. As Lenise was the only one to ever see this instrument in use, she did the sweeping. Hours later, with dry, cracked lips and sore muscles, they broke for a lunch of bread, cheese, and lots of fruit. Never had a meal tasted so good to them, for never had a meal been consumed by either of them after working, or with worry over where the next one would come from. Included with the sacks of prepared food were packages of dry goods equipped with instructions. Neither Terry nor Lenise had ever cooked before, and neither knew who was to cook now. They discussed this dilemma, joking about who was more cut out for the task. Then they decided that since they had learned how to clean together, they would learn how to cook together. The leftovers from their lunch lay scattered about the scarcely hygienic table. Denise cut off the salvageable items and placed them on a shelf. Terry scraped off the crumbs into his hand and stood there looking at them. Most of this day has been spent cleaning, Denise said, pushing her hair out of her eyes. We had breakfast, then cleaned this hut. We had lunch, and now we're cleaning this hut again. True, Terry answered, wondering what to do with the stuff in his hand, then went over to the open square of a window and brushed the crumbs outside. Looking back at Denise for signs of approval or disapproval, he found neither and shrugged. We're doing a great job so far, don't you think? He said. Denise laughed at that idea. I think that we're doing without thinking. Maybe this cleaning is a natural thing to do. It may be, Terry said, but we'd better put some thought into making a cycle can, or we're going to have a big pile outside the window. Amused, Denise went over and gave Terry a hug. We'll figure it out. There's not much else to do. From Fedora's note in the box that she sent, it looks like we're going to be here for a while. Remember the note? Terry asked. What's a key? Denise shook her head in disbelief. The sole reason for their coming here hadn't been found. As soon as they had located this particular hut, Diana snuck away, leaving Terry and Lenise inside while she stole the sliver. By the time Terry was able to console her niece, they were both exhausted. They fell asleep on the crumbling cot. The niece went over to the shelf where she'd laid the note and pulled the key from it. "This is a key," she said, handing it to Terry. It felt cold and hard between his thumb and forefinger. "What's it for?" he asked, looking at it as if it was snot on the end of his finger. "It opens the box that we came here to get." The niece went over to the cradle where they were supposed to find the box. After not finding the box inside of it, she pushed the cradle aside. "It's supposed to be hidden here somewhere," she said. Getting down on her knees, she pushed on the floorboards and found one loose. She pushed down one end of the board and it turned up slightly. "I need something skinny to slide under it," she said. "Skinny?" Terry asked. The word was foreign to him. "Yes, skinny. Thin, like a knife." Terry went to the crate and rooted around for the knife that he'd thrown back into it after lunch. Finding it, he brought it to her. She pushed down one end of the board and stuck the knife under the other end to push it up. The board snapped in two, spraying dust into her face. When it settled, she looked into the opening and saw the corner of the box. Looking away this time, she pried the other half of the board off. There was a metal box, covered with more than a century of dust. She pulled it out and made the mistake of blowing the dust off the top. Coughing and waving her hand in front of her, she carried the box to the table and set it down. Terry followed her as if she were carrying the Holy Grail. He was having a hard time not laughing at the dusty niece. They both settled down at the table and sat quietly, looking at the box for a while, wondering what to do with it next. Then Terry held up the key. "How does this open that?" he asked. There was so much for her to explain. There was so much that he didn't know, and for the first time she realized that there were a lot of things that she didn't know either. "My guess is that it goes into that slot," she said, pointing to the keyhole. Terry inserted the key. The box did not open. Frustrated, he took the key back out of the box. "It doesn't work," he said. "Let me try," Lenny said. Fumbling with it, she chanced upon turning the key, and the lid popped open. They looked at each other like pilgrims discovering popcorn. Terry reached inside, took out the black leather book. He brushed a layer of age from it, having learned from Lenice's mistake, then peeled back the crackling cover. The first page was blank. Carefully, he turned the brown tissue leaf to reveal the second page. Written on it were these words: "The Journal of Troy de Foy." Paying no attention to the dazzling niece, who couldn't believe that Terry could read, nor the fact that the journal was that of a male, Terry turned the page and read aloud, and then on to the next and the next, until he had read the entire journal. Though the journal was small, it was dusk when he had finished. Terry didn't quite understand the enormity of the situation, having heard Olo tell him that, one day, men and women would live together, so the words hadn't placed him in the same spell that Lenice was under. Knowing that the goddess was sinking behind the mountains, he spoke. "It is time to search for water." Bernice was still dumbfounded, her mind a plethora of questions. Where had Terry learned to read? Why didn't these words bother him? What were they going to do? How were they going to survive? What was the point in surviving anyway? What if the journal was a hoax? What if it wasn't? Was this all a commoner's plot? What about their baby? The culture shock was making her schizophrenic. "Do you want me to go alone?" Terry asked when he hadn't gotten a response. Lenice looked at him. "What?" was all that she could get out. Terry's innocence made him oblivious. He didn't know that other charges couldn't read. He didn't know that he'd performed a miracle and that rock that he held was oozing blood. "Do you want me to go alone?" he repeated. "Go alone where?" "To look for water," he answered. "Water?" "Yes, Lenice, water. We must find water. The goddess has gone down. It's not hot out there, but the dark will be here soon. We both agreed that this was what we were going to do." "Right," she said, rising from the table. "We must find water," she said, following Terry out the door. When the daddy would wake up and watch the mommy sleeping, curled up in his arms. But they didn't. Dear Ava, together, free.